Well, welcome everyone to our Doctor of Education online EdD program faculty panel webinar here this evening. My name is Serena Stewart. I'm Associate Director of Admissions, and I'm joined by our faculty members in the EdD program. Before we introduce our faculty panel and get into the discussions here this evening, I will share just a little bit about our program. So just a brief agenda. We'll go over the program highlights as well as the admissions timeline for any of you who don't already have that information here. We'll have our faculty introduce themselves and go through some just different frequently asked questions that I get from a lot of our prospective students in the EdD program, and then we'll open it up for your Q&A. So you can use the Q&A function here in Zoom to ask your questions of our faculty panelists. So just to start and give you kind of a high-level overview of the EdD program, the program itself is 90 credits overall. 36 credits are automatically transferred from your master's degree. So typically students complete 54 credits across 3 to 4 years here at JHU in the EdD program. There is a potential for students who have postmaster's work, maybe a postmaster's certificate, or even some doctoral work already, to transfer up to 6 postmaster's credits into the program in addition to that 36, letting students have at least a minimum of 48 credits here to complete in the EdD program. The program is part-time, fully online, majority asynchronous. We do have synchronous supports. We do have synchronous supports set up in the program to help to advise our students to build community. We'll talk about some of those in our panel discussion here tonight. And then the final and culminating piece of the program is the doctoral dossier. That dossier is embedded and completed in your coursework throughout your time in the 4 years that you're in the degree. We'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in a couple slides. The program itself is rigorous and focused on relevant systemic and social justice perspectives. That's truly a hallmark of the program and the thinking that you'll do and the lens in which you'll view your problem of practice. And students communicate research in modalities other than just scholarly writing. Taking a closer look at the curriculum structure of the program, there's 15 credits in the Foundations of Education, 12 credits in Applied Research, 12 credits in Doctoral Dossier Research, and 15 credits in your electives, which focus in your areas of interest. The fall 2026 areas of interest are entrepreneurial leadership in education, learning design and technology, neurodiversity and neuroeducation, and urban leadership. A frequently asked question that I get from many students is, what if I have interests that span multiple areas of interest? Or what if my problem of practice really marries more than one of these areas of interest? That is okay. You are required to select one area of interest on your admissions application, but while you're in the program, you can take classes in multiple areas of interest. The doctoral dossier research credits are done each year you're in the program. So you're really focusing on that dossier starting in year 1, moving all the way into your final year. So looking at that doctoral dossier just a little bit closer. So this is the final and most significant requirement for our EdD degree. It's focused on your problem of practice within your professional practice and your professional context. You really start to explore this in your admissions application in your essay, and then dive into that in year 1. The dossier itself is a culmination of multiple projects that are completed independently but are closely interrelated. As I said, they're embedded into your coursework and distributed across your time in the program. And the outcome is potential for significant change within your professional practice or with implications to education policy. So you're not just doing this research for theory's sake or in general, this research is really embedded and really kind of anchored in your specific professional context. The doctoral dossier structure is based around Boyer's four scholarship domains. In year one, you complete the project of integration. This is a systems examination of your problem of practice. The goal of this project is really foundational to the understanding that of the research you'll do in years 2 and 3. So this is the foundational project, and your projects in years 2 and 3 build upon this project. It is a review of your problem of practice to really refine and define what it is you're going to continue on with your research. Then in year 2, you have the choice of two projects, either the scholarship of teaching or the scholarship of application. The scholarship of teaching is the development and improvement of pedagogical practices. The scholarship of application is demonstrating research to practice. You'll determine avenues to disseminate evidence to a wider audience. And we're going to get into some more concrete examples as we open up our faculty panel discussion. And then in year 3, you can choose either of the projects you didn't complete in year 2, or you can choose to do the scholarship of discovery. And the scholarship of discovery is really the search for new knowledge. This is the student's ability to conduct evidence-based research that leads to knowledge creation. Then at the culmination of the program and in your final year, you do your final defense. Your dossier also has an executive summary of all of your projects and a final reflection of your doctoral journey. So moving on from the curriculum and the dossier into the admissions timeline. So right now you can start applying to the program. The deadline to apply is coming up. It's January 21st, 2026. This is the final deadline to submit not just your application, but all of your supporting materials, including your official transcripts, any test scores you want to submit, as well as your essay and your resume and letters of recommendation. Then moving into the admissions review process in January and February, there's two things you really need to focus on. One is select applicants will start to receive invitations for a virtual interview. Not all students are selected, but if you do receive a selection for an interview, you'll receive an email communication from the program and instructions on how to complete that interview. And then you'll want to really focus on your completion of your FAFSA, or your free application for federal student aid. So all students who have a FAFSA on file and who are admitted into the program are considered for EdD scholarships that are need-based. So you'll want to make sure that you get that FAFSA submitted before we release admission decisions in mid-March. Whether or not you complete your application early or right at the deadline, you're not going to hear an admission decision until mid-March. So if you already have your application in and submitted, I know some of you do not get antsy. All decisions are released at the same time. And then students will have until April 29th, 2026 to accept their offer of admission and pay the enrollment deposit if they choose to become a student in our EdD program. So that closes just the introduction of the program and the admissions process. At this time, I will turn it over to our faculty to introduce themselves, and we'll get started on the panel discussion. I do see we have some questions already as well. So go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I am Chrissy Ith. I am the department chair that oversees the doctoral programs and our MEHP program. I'm also a little bit long in this program as well. So I was one of the few folks who started with the program back in 2013. And I'm also serving as the interim director of the program this year as we hand it off to hopefully our new director that will be starting soon. My background, I'm a sociologist by degree, and I teach mostly in the program in our research methods practice.
Hi, everybody, and welcome tonight. My name is Eric Rice. I actually am one of the other people who's been here since 2013 and participated in building the program in its original iteration. I have played a number of roles in the program over the years. I have been and sometimes still serve as the urban leadership lead, and have created some of the courses in that. I also run our teacher development programs, which is basically our partnerships with Teach for America and TNTP for training new teachers. I do research around restorative practices, and I am an anthropologist by training. And so I am currently doing a project looking at how educators have used the concept of culture and what they think they mean by it. So,
Hey everybody, welcome. My name's Josh Brown. I'm sort of the newbie here. I research higher education. I teach everything from business to sociology to higher ed courses, both here and beyond. Um, some of you may have seen the book I just wrote right over my shoulder, Capitalizing on College. My latest research is starting to look at how college and university presidents and provosts and leaders are going to function in light of the absence of the Department of Education. So that's where we're headed next, and what's going to happen with the new accreditation system. So I'm trying to get my head around all that. I also direct the advising center here at Johns Hopkins and oversee a cohort of advisees as well that I'm super excited about.
Awesome, thank you. So to get our panel discussion started, we'll start with a pretty straightforward and simple question. Can one or two of you kind of describe what the typical cohort of the EDD program looks like in size, diversity, maybe talk about some of the students' professional backgrounds, where they're from around the globe?
If I can find my mute button, yes. Sorry. So our EDD cohorts have ranged over the last roughly 12, 13 years that we've been in there. Right now, we're aiming for around 75 to 80 students to start. Um, our students are really diverse, and I think one of the things that is a real testament to this program in particular is we have students from a lot of different backgrounds. So we have medical educators, we have IT professionals, we have global policy experts. We have classroom teachers. We have classroom teachers from generally in any given cohort, 7 or 8 different countries. So the nice thing that I see in terms of thinking about the diversity is that, and I've seen a couple of comments in the chat around being an occupational therapist and wanting to also add in education and leadership and neuroscience. That's one of the things that I think is a hallmark of this particular program. We attract a very economically, a very sort of disciplinary, a very cultural, diverse group of people who all come together with one sort of focus being they are educators, but they're educators in a lot of different kinds of ways. And that's, I think, what's really cool about the work that we get to do every day with our students.
Awesome, thank you. So another question that I get that students frequently ask is, what is different about this EDD program? How does Johns Hopkins differentiate itself from other EDD programs that are out there?
Um, I think Eric, you might wanted to add a piece to this before, but
Yeah.
I'll start a little bit on our differentiation. I think I sort of am going to reiterate what I just said, but one of the things that I think differentiates our program from others is that our focus in this program is not just a cohort of teachers. There's a lot of universities that focus on a particular specialization area, and that's all that they do. There's other programs that focus just on sort of the K-12 space, and that's what they do. We think that the value of bringing educators in a very kind of global way together is what makes a difference. So you might be in a classroom with a K-12 teacher. I'm thinking of one particular group of our students, that the head of culture for Google the head of Singapore, of Apple in Singapore, of education for Apple in Singapore, a classroom teacher in Baltimore, Maryland, um, someone who's doing really cool work reevaluating the entire system of education in Sao Paulo, Brazil. All of you are going to be in the same classroom together. And each one of you have a very different way of doing education, and that's what makes it kind of special.
Yeah, I had actually been thinking about jumping in on the last question with kind of a similar point that sometimes students will react to a particular discussion or reading in a class like, oh, well, I'm working on X. So how is that relevant for me? But I think that part of the strength of the cohort model and the diversity in the cohort, but I think it also speaks to what makes us, I don't know about if unique, but different, is that you are learning from people from all over the world with a diversity of interests. And those diverse perspectives, when things are working well, lead you to look at your problem of practice in new and different ways that you might never have thought of. And so I think that I had been thinking about that as one of the advantages of what our typical cohort is. But I think it speaks to this second question as well.
Yeah, definitely agree. So moving into kind of a different lens on how the program is different. A lot of students who are looking into an EDD program might also be exploring a PhD program. So could you talk a little bit about the differences between a PhD in education and an EDD?
I'll start. Although, well, Josh, you go ahead. You haven't spoken yet, and I saw you on
Okay.
mute.
Yeah. In this instance, you're going to have a handful of fewer methods courses, right? So you might have one or two, one course in qual, one course in quant methods. You might have one research design, and that might be it. But what those are going to do is they're going to sort of solve they're going to serve as the foundation of inquiry for your problem that you want to solve about the world that's meaningful to you. And it's going to help you answer that problem. But what it's not meant to do is to sort of get you into the academic journals. It might be an aspiration of yours, but that's not the point. That's not the push. That road can be available to you, but the ultimate endeavor is for you to answer your problem that's most meaningful to you in an empirical, inquisitive way. Um, and then yeah, I'll let Eric chime in some more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had something similar in mind, right? That this is intended for, and we throw around the term scholar practitioners, right? But your scholarship is meant to improve your practice. And I would say a typical PhD program, is probably full time, and is intended to, as my colleague mentioned, you're going to do more methods training, and the focus is probably going to be mostly on the scholarship of discovery. And that is, you are going to be looking to create that new knowledge and to publish it in academic journals and probably, look for jobs in academia or a big research firm or something like that. Many of our students do end up using the EDD to move into new positions, sometimes in the same organization they're in, sometimes in others, sometimes in academia. But the primary focus of the program is on working on a practical problem in your current practice, figuring out how to solve that and using that expertise to improve something in your context.
Awesome. So thinking about the more practical and the more like nuts and bolts pieces of the program, can you discuss the structure of courses, the online format, asynchronous versus synchronous? There is also a question about like particular areas of interest. So if any of you teach any classes in the areas of interest, could you kind of go through some of the courses that are offered there?
Sure, I can start with this. I would say, the classes are for the most part asynchronous courses. They're organized so that you work on most of the work on your own time. with intermittent synchronous sessions where the entire group, and sometimes that's very hard to organize. So it's not, I would say it's not an absolute requirement in most classes. You might have a requirement to meet individually with your faculty member, but the synchronous sessions are recorded so that, things come up, or if you can't make it at the time that, the rest of the class can, you can then catch up on that and check in with your faculty member if you'd like. They tend to be in 2-week sessions. That's not always the case, but the standard would be the first week is kind of devoted to doing the readings, watching recorded lectures. Sometimes those are lectures from your faculty members. Sometimes those are discussions between faculty members that have been recorded. Sometimes those are guest lecturers we've brought in to talk about specific topics. Might be videos that are available from other places. And then the second week is often focused on some kind of discussion. That is more often than not an online discussion, although I think a lot of faculty have also been working in other ways of doing that, whether those are, video discussions or videos that people respond to, or, sometimes the sync session will replace that online discussion. I think the assignments and assessments over the course of any given course can look fairly different. Sometimes that's one big project at the end. I would say more often it's something scaffolded where you're working towards a larger project. Often, but not always, those projects are tied to, one of the bigger projects you're doing for your dossier, at least in the idea of thinking through ideas, if not in something where the actual writing might work for that. It might be a research methods proposal. It might be a reaction to reading about the anthropology of education and how that might apply to your program. And then just to answer the other piece of that, the specialization that I've worked most closely with is urban leadership. And so the courses in that are structured, and again, you don't have to take all of these, you can sample from across, but the way that they were structured is an introductory course to what we mean by, what makes cities different. You might think of it that way. How is thinking about urban education similar to or different than thinking about other kinds of education? And what's hidden in the term urban? What are people actually talking about or not saying? And some analysis of that. And then the other 3 courses kind of look at different levels, right? So individuals, institutions, and then relationships, partnerships, and family and community organizing. So that's the way that the courses in that special area of interest are organized.
Great. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
I was just to kind of speak to a few things that are in the chat, Serena. So generally,
Yeah.
students are taking about 2 courses a semester. That would be what I would say is the average. I think there's when we think about what the core courses, the way the courses tend to go in the flow over time is that we start you with foundational courses. So there's going back to those points that you had up earlier, the foundational courses tend to come first. There's a dossier course that's going through each one. And then ultimately you're going to be taking more of your electives and your specializations towards the second and third year, into your 4th year if you're going to take a 4th year. So one of the things that you want to think about is that the flow is going to be, we're going to get the core elements of the program in there first. There was a question from Rose about additional methods courses. Additional methods courses can be taken as some of your elective credits, yes. So you can go beyond the required number of methods courses to be able to take some additional ones if you want that specific training. And there was a question earlier on from Karen about qualitative research design. Believe it or not, a lot of our dissertations use qualitative research designs. So absolutely, that's on the table.
Great, thanks. Anything else to add there? Okay, awesome. So thinking about the types of research and support faculty provide, and then also kind of the advising structure and synchronous supports in the program, could you speak to what is in place, how students get that faculty support, and if there's any peer mentorship piece as well?
I'll chime in a little bit here. Each faculty or each student's assigned to a faculty member as your sort of mentor as you come into the program. I've got 10 at the moment that I'm working with one-on-one, literally right before, from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, right before this meeting here. We met for an hour. They had given me their 30-page papers. I had spent time doing a line-by-line edit because it's the end of the term. This is their final product. They're going to submit it next week. And it was just sort of this very intimate sort of discussion between the three of them that were put on a team. So that's a very sort of hands-on level of mentoring. But there's also like peer mentoring through the Writing Center, where let's say you need some help with APA citations or some sort of grammatical help. We have peer mentors that are available for you to meet with on a weekly basis throughout the term to get writing support that you need. Student Affairs has other services that they offer as well. So there's a variety of sort of touch points throughout the organization that, as a student, if you need them, they are available to you. They're not necessarily going to be pushed on you as much as you'll need to reach out and utilize those that are made available to you.
Awesome. Anything else you want to add about that? No? Okay. And then can we talk about kind of accessibility of faculty members outside of scheduled class time, what that looks like, especially with it being a largely independent asynchronous program?
Sure, I can start, and I'm sure each one of us is going to have our own perspectives on these two. I think faculty tend to do, I would say, I think our faculty are very flexible and recognize that we work with students that are literally all over the globe. And so when we talk about these synchronous sessions, I just want to sort of parse out a little bit that usually there's more than one synchronous, like there might be a synchronous session for a particular session in a course, but there will be multiple times. Usually there's an early morning session. So all of the courses run on East Coast time, meaning that the deadlines and everything are written in East Coast time. But usually faculty will have an early morning session for our students in Asia, Alaska. Alaska is the one that tends to be a little bit challenging, depending on the flexibility of the jobs. But we'll usually have an early morning session, a mid-afternoon session, an evening session to try to capture everybody. So when we talk about synchronicity, we talk about that sort of within the course of a session, but there's multiple opportunities to engage synchronously. I think most of the faculty, one of the things, and I know there was a question in the chat as well about this sort of advising model. I think the one thing that I think I can speak for all of our faculty around is that one of the things that we enjoy the most is our one-on-one time with our students. It's not that we are in an online program and ignore it, like, we don't see you until we see you kind of thing. I think most faculty tend to be as available as their time allows to meet with students and meet with students when it's available, when it's mutually beneficial. So it can be a morning meeting East Coast time, it can be an evening meeting East Coast time, with the recognition that we are working with folks all over the country, all over the world. Josh, Eric, you want to add?
Yeah, I would just say, I would agree with all of that. I would say it's also important that some of our faculty are not here in Baltimore, right? So we have faculty in different time zones as well. So that, can be, in some ways, I suppose that can make it more difficult, but it does mean that there are often faculty who are available on different times than Baltimore time, which can be very helpful at times. And I do think, it is good to not reach out to a faculty member when I mean, you should do it if you need to, but if you need an answer in the next hour, sometimes that's not the best way to do it. But if you can anticipate and give a little warning with that time, we are all organizing our time to make sure that we are responding to students as best we can. We do have other responsibilities, but I've never heard of a faculty member being upset to be contacted by a student outside of class time. The one other thing that I did want to mention, it's not really the advising structure, but there is a cohort lead for each cohort who's responsive to questions about program structure, about requirements, about who do I talk to about this. is it okay to contact that faculty member? Oh, I can call that person in that center who might have expertise in this and make an appointment, that sort of thing. And that speaks to one of the questions in the chat. Center faculty have different responsibilities and might be away on a grant or a project, but for the most part, I think are quite open to talking to students and serving on committees and that kinds of thing.
Great. Thank you. Looking at some of the questions that I see in the chat, I see that one of them is about on-campus time. So can one of you just talk about the residency, what that experience is like, how long is it, how it builds connection in the cohort, and, the typical experience of the student during the residency process?
I mean, I'll start, and hopefully my colleagues will correct anything I get wrong. But the last couple of years, it's been generally over kind of 2 days, a Monday, Tuesday, usually in July. Often students come in the weekend before. I know last year I've been cohort lead for the 2022s, and we organized a dinner Sunday night and that kind of thing. Monday and Tuesday are usually pretty packed with sessions. The sessions are organized, at least over the last couple of residencies, by a panel of students who are at different points in the program and have, I think, great ideas about what is most helpful to new students. It is differentiated, so there are lots of times where people come together across multiple cohorts, but there are other times where people will break out into groups for things that are more relevant to new students, more relevant to students getting ready to do their proposal, more relevant to students getting ready to do their defense. And sometimes there will also be some stuff around different areas of interest or other kinds of topics. So usually as a keynote speaker, and then there are social events, right? The meals, sometimes have a speaker, sometimes are just a chance to socialize. My experience is that students tend to really enjoy it, look forward to it. I've had a lot of requests from the 2022s about, is there a way that they can continue to come back and participate after they graduate? It's a great time to get to spend time with faculty, over a meal, over a drink, whatever it may be. So I think all of that is, I think it's a really enjoyable experience, and my sense is that it's very valuable to students.
So I want to piggyback Eric and talk about the outcomes about everything he just mentioned. When you're studying in an online or a distance learning graduate program like I did with mine, it can be frightening or concerning that you won't get the network that comes with that credential. And part of going to graduate school, at least the advice that I was given from my uncle before I went off to get my PhD, he was like, Josh, just remember the highest degree that you get will be your network for the rest of your life. So for me, when you're in one of my courses, it's assumed you're in a team. And you're in a team because the relationships that you're establishing with your peers it's vital. 10 years from now, after you're finished with that degree and you're running the company because you're the vice president, I hope you're able to pick up the phone and can call or shoot off an email to some of the colleagues that were in your cohort because you were that tight. And so, as Eric talked about the residency and being here in person, it's important because of those relationships and what those relationships allow you to do, not just in the program, but for 5, 10, 15, 20 years later. Those are just as vital as the credential itself, I would argue.
Yeah, and I think that, and to piggyback off of that piece, I think I can say, over the 12 years of the program, I still am in touch with my students. The students are still very much in touch with each other. And I'll say there's also, for those of you who might not have looked at it just yet, there's a Center for Doctoral Life Design at Hopkins, centrally at Hopkins, that also does a lot of really impressive networking and building the network as well. They usually come to residency and have some sessions with us too to help students think about careers, their sort of, what their path in life is going to be during the degree, post degree. So, I think that the in-person residency piece is where students really do build the bonds that are going to sustain them.
Great. Thank you all so much for talking in depth about that. I'm seeing a couple of questions in the chat based around how many hours it takes to do coursework per week, and specifically real-world school leadership challenges, how the coursework addresses leadership and leadership challenges that students are facing.
I advise my students in my classes 45 minutes to 60 minutes a day. And that's emails, that's readings, that's going for a walk and thinking about the readings, right? That's literally like immersing yourself in the content of the course and everything pertaining to it. What I've found generally doesn't work as well as what I sort of call this sort of weekend warrior approach, where everybody in the program has a full-time job. I did my PhD and master's the exact same way that you all are looking at this program here. And it was the weekend approach where if you just work all week and then you try to deal with the class on the weekends in these sort of concentrated efforts, I feel that those individuals that have that approach tend to struggle a little bit more, on a variety of levels, both conceptually, both relationally. It poses challenges for their classmates, uh, coordinate times if there's teamwork involved. So again, my recommendation is 45 minutes to an hour a day, but I also have this sort of inching approach about life, just taking it incrementally rather than in sort of these heavy doses. That's just one take. Eric or Chrissy?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I like that idea. I would say I think there's we could talk about Carnegie units and what the total number of things are, but I think the students that have the greatest success are those who do take the incremental approach and are you know, um, whether it be an hour a day or, they tend to focus on certain Tuesdays and Thursdays. The one thing I'll say about it, I think the first semester is always, every student I've had so far sort of has the best laid plans, right? I know exactly how I'm going to do this, and then they start the program and they realize I'm doing it right now. I'm going through an accreditation program, and I was like, I got this. I know how to do this. Literally within the first session of the course, I'm like, I don't have this. And I needed to recalibrate and just kind of step back and say, here's how I need to reallocate my time. So I think in part it's the incremental, but it's also understanding flexibility and fluidity. Some semesters are going to be more work than others. It's not an even amount of work from day one to graduation day. So the one thing I want to sort of add is, your dossier, there is independent work that happens through doctoral programs. And so there's the coursework, there's the credit work, and there's the milestones. And we need to think about, I think what Josh is saying is great advice, because you might be in a course right now and you're going to use that in 3 semesters from now when you're thinking about it for your dossier. So I know that's not the greatest, clearest answer, but a couple hours a day, it doesn't hurt. Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I'm really bad at what Josh describes as a good approach. So, I it's not that I'm necessarily a weekend warrior, but I tend to be like, oh, today I'm going to spend however many hours on this task, and then tomorrow maybe I'll get to the other thing, or oh gosh, I didn't do that thing that I was supposed to do last week. So I think part of it is finding the system that works for you. I will say, in my classes, I have found that the people who can spread their participation in the discussions over more days and, an hour a day here and there, rather than jumping in the weekend, get the most out of the discussions because they are part of the discussion at the beginning, in the middle, in the end, rather than coming in and reading a few things and responding and then not having a chance for people to respond to them. So I do think that is great advice. I think the trick is making sure that you are finding time, particularly as you get further into the program, not only to do your coursework, but to be putting time, to split that time and be organized. I'm going to do an hour on the course and I'm going to do an hour on working on my proposal and keeping the different pieces moving forward at the same time.
Great. Thank you. I'm looking at the chat, there's a bunch of different themes here. Dr. Rice, there is one specifically for you. So if you want to chime in with that question, they're asking for some book recommendations in your particular field. But looking at research, there's one question about, to what degree do EdD candidates conduct research in the field of education? And then another one is, are students encouraged to kind of narrow their focus, or can they research in mixed methods to look at individual outcomes and system level patterns? Maybe not the best blending of two questions, but if we could hit them, that would be great.
I can start and hand it off to my colleagues. I think the short answer is, I think we encourage you to do research, and I think we also recognize that research comes in various forms. So research as a term is rather large, and I don't want to make too much, I don't want to try to interpret that too broadly, but what I would say is we generally um, encourage students to stay focused on their particular practice. So narrow in so much as that we're focusing on your professional practice. That could mean your classroom. That could mean your district. That could mean your corporation. That could mean the Ministry of Education. So narrowing, yes, but narrowing doesn't necessarily mean myopic. Colleagues?
Sorry, I was responding to written questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Um, yeah, it looks like Dr. Rice is responding to that question. Well, I guess we'll do one more and then we will close that. I recognize we have more than one more open question, but we have ways for you to get in contact with us after the webinar. So let's see. Can we talk about students who might be like career changers or doing multiple master's degree not related to education? What does that look like in this program as far as, the student diversity, and how is this going to open doors for students after they graduate?
I mean, I can start. I think I've had the opportunity to work with some amazing folks in the last two cohorts that have graduated. I've had folks range from, again, working for very large corporations and staying put in the corporation, but moving up into leadership roles. So the impact of the degree has helped with promotion within their organization. I've had students who classroom teachers who were working at the district and are now tenure track faculty at one's at University of New Mexico. So we have folks that stay within the organization and get promoted. There's others who want to change careers and do just that. I think the one thing I would caution in terms of making a broad statement about is there are a lot of folks who are kind of coming in, and I saw a couple of comments in the chat around this where they've, you're in a career that you like and you're doing self-improvement as well as coming into the degree to move to something new. I think both of those can be achieved through the EDD.
I'll chime in here. Used to the first two questions I would get asked at a conference were, um, where did you study and who did you study with? Those were always back to back. They always wanted to know the answer to those two questions. Today's era, with the broader public skeptical about higher education and focused on skills, I actually believe the EDD is positioned for success if you're willing to focus your problem of practice on a skills-based, outcomes-based topic. Like to the extent that you're willing to own it, right? If you want to design an app that's going to tackle an education problem, if you want to design a system, or if you want to conquer some sort of problem of practice, you actually will leave not only with a credential from Johns Hopkins, you'll leave with an outcome or a skill or a product that others in a PhD program won't have. You'll have a leg up if you choose to sort of craft your program in that way. And that's where the onus falls on you, right? As an inventor of your curriculum, as an inventor of your EDD, you are sort of tasked with the agency to make that happen. Again, in years prior, it was, this guy went to UVA. This woman over here went to Harvard. In today's era, not so much. Folks are interested in skills, in outcomes, in what can you do, what can you achieve. And I think this program sets you up for that if you are willing to do that work and structure it yourself.
Great. Well, thank you all for your time and for your expertise in our panel discussion. I really appreciate you all for being a part of our admissions webinar. And thank you to our participants who posed your questions, engaged in the discussion. We really appreciate you showing up. As I said, my name is Serena Stewart. My contact information is here if you have any additional questions about the admissions process, financial aid, what you need for your application, any of those questions. I did see a couple of them come up in the chat. I'm happy to help you with any of those questions. If you have more specific programmatic questions, you can reach out to the EDD program. The face and the name behind our SOE EDD email address is Denise. You can see her contact information there if you wish to reach out to the EDD program. So thank you all so much for taking the time, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your evening.